Hello and welcome. My name is Felipe and I'm a digital marketing specialist and Masters of Data Science student here in Oregon. In this video, we're going to use Python to analyze some corn yield data and see if we can gain some insights. I built a data set using AI from crop insurance reports, so let's go ahead and dive in. We're going to be using two libraries today. One is called Pandas, which is for data manipulation, and you can think of this as spreadsheets, rows and columns. And we're also going to be using Matplotlib, which is for presenting charts and graphs and helping you visualize this data. So I'm using Jupyter Notebook and I'm making a few more assumptions, and that is that Jupyter Notebook is already installed on your system. I've left a link in the description if you need to get that installed on your specific build. And I'm also assuming that for the most part this data is clean and ready for us to analyze. So normally you'd want to first take a look at the data and replace missing values, maybe drop columns that you don't need. However, we're going to make the assumption here that this data is pretty clean, but I'm still going to walk you through a few ways to kind of take a look at your data and just see if there's any sort of issues or problems. So let's go ahead and begin by importing these libraries that we need to use. So first we're going to start with Pandas. And the thing I like about computer programming or using Python is that talking to yourself can be advantageous here. So I'm going to import Pandas as an alias PD. So what this does is it allows us to call the Pandas library and use it in our code without having to write Pandas. It just lets us use PD, which is kind of a standard practice that you'll see. And a lot of these libraries have sort of standard practices for these aliases to kind of make the code a lot shorter. So what we wanted to do is we need to place the spreadsheet into this script, in this program, and have it turned into something that we can manipulate with Pandas. So to do that, we're going to create a data frame. So that's usually df, and that's kind of standard practice. And that data frame is going to equal whatever Pandas reads inside our CSV. And we've got parentheses there, and parentheses are used for providing inputs or arguments. So in this example, we need to provide it with the location of this spreadsheet. So it's going to be a string. That's why you've got quotation marks. And the nice thing about this is that the spreadsheet is in the same folder as this script. So I don't have to mess around with slashes or folder paths. It becomes a bit more complicated because you have to ensure that those slashes and backslashes aren't read incorrectly. But for now, we're going to keep it simple and just assume that the script and the spreadsheet is in the same place. So now we need to know if this worked. So we're going to take a look at the data frame, and I want to see just the top, maybe just the head or maybe the first 5 rows. So here's that argument again, the parentheses. So I want to return the top 5. So I'm going to save that and run that code, and you'll see here that I'm presented with this with the first 5 results from the table. So this allows me to take a look at the data, see if there's any sort of inconsistencies. I can change this 5 to 10, and now I can see 10 rows. So I can do 20, 30, however many I want to take a look at, just to kind of preview this. So looking at the data, you'd be looking for missing values. You'd be looking for inconsistencies, whether maybe there's a column that's all percentages and then you see a word instead. So that's what you're going to be wanting to clean up. But again, the assumption here is that this spreadsheet is ready to go. So now the next step might be kind of taking a look at the shape. How many rows do you have? So that's going to be using the shape method or the shape function. And you can see that there's 57 rows and 12 columns. So we haven't used square brackets yet, but let's go ahead and talk about those because we're going to be using those in a little bit. So the parentheses are usually used for passing in some kind of input. So in our examples, we passed in where the spreadsheet is and how many results we wanted to receive. Square brackets are going to be used for creating a list. So let's say you don't have a spreadsheet of data, you just have a list of items. You could actually create a list, and I'll show you how you would do that. So right here, the data frame could be a list of names, for example. So we'll put a name there, a name there, a name there. So this is a list which also acts as a data frame. The square brackets are also used for slicing up data. So it kind of allows you to reach into a data frame, and we're going to see how that works in a second. But for now, let's go ahead and just stick with some more of these sort of descriptive methods to look at your data. So I'm going to add another box here, and let's take a look at the column names. I can see them on the top here, but maybe there are some that I can't see. So you can do another one of these codes here, another one of these properties is what they are, and you'll be returned with the column names. So the reason why these don't have parentheses are because these are properties of the data. We're asking it for how many rows, how many columns, what's the column names. It's not actually performing any kind of function, any kind of method on these things. So that's why they are missing the parentheses. But now let's go ahead and actually get some more information about this data set using something else. So we're going to do this against the data frame that we have, and we're going to use the describe function, which does use parentheses. And the reason why is because this is actually performing some kind of action. You can see that it's returning the mean or the average of each column. It's providing us a standard deviation, the minimum, the maximum. Some of these sort of general statistics that you could use to understand your data. But for now, we're looking at it, not really much of use for us at this point. So what we're going to do now is go ahead and actually get into the corn data. So we've got this data frame which has several different kinds of crops, but we just want to look at corn. So we just want the corn data, which is going to be its own new data frame. So we're taking this current large data frame, and we're only going to be taking what we need from it to create another one that we're going to manipulate. So this corn data is going to include our current data frame, but I only want to actually grab something specific. I only want the corn data. So I'm going to be using the square brackets because I want to slice, I want to grab something. So, but what I want to grab is a column. So I want to grab the column crop type from this data frame. But I only want to grab it when that's equal to corn. So let's stop right there and take a look at this because it's a bit more complicated. So what we're doing here is we're creating a new data frame called corn data, and that's going to include the data frame, but only the data frame column crop type when it equals corn. So now let's go ahead and take a look and see if this worked. So I'm going to, just like before with df.head, I can do corn data.head and ask it for maybe just the first 10. And what I'm looking at here is I can see that it worked. I've got a new data frame of just the corn listings, and I can do the same sort of things that we just did and take a look at the shape, take a look at the column names, and just see what actually happened when I performed those things. So far so good. But let's actually go ahead and maybe organize these this corn data by maybe group by irrigation and tillage practice. So for that, add another box here. And we're going to create, now some groups. So we're going to create some corn groups, and that's going to be equal to the corn data grouped by, and we'll stop there. So you'll see that it's just variables, these labels. So when using Python, you have to store things inside of other things. So you can see here in this example, we're going to be grouping the corn data and storing that in something called corn groups. So just like with the brackets, and I said that you can create lists with brackets, we want to grab more than one column. So we're going to use a list here instead of just one. So I'm going to go ahead and add a few things there. And I want to grab tillage practice, and I also want to group this by, and I'm going to copy and paste this just so I make sure I don't spell it wrong, irrigation. All right, so now we've got the corn groups broken down and grouped by tillage practice and irrigation. But you can't quite see anything. So if we were going to do corn groups and then do the head and do 10, you'll get what you're looking for. All right, but not quite what we're looking to do yet. So we want to bring yield into this, right? So now we're going to create a corn yield label, and we want to grab the corn groups, but just the yield inside of that corn groups data frame. So again, using the square brackets because we're going to be reaching into this data frame. And I want to grab yield. But I don't just want to return the column. I want to return the average yield. So I'm going to use another function or method here, and it's going to call mean. And Pandas has many of these functions that you can use that does something to columns and data and rows. So you can use sum, you can use mean, mode, several different things. So for this example, we're going to use mean. The next thing we want to do though is sort this from largest to smallest. So to do that, you still have to create another one of these labels and tell it what's inside of that label. So sorted corn yield is going to be equal to our corn yield and sorted by the values in ascending order, and this is going to be false, and that's so that we can get it from largest to smallest. So let's go ahead and I'm going to use a print statement instead to show you the difference here. So a print statement just allows you to print the raw output. So you can see it's not table formatted, not quite easy to read, not quite useful yet. So we're going to go ahead and keep going. But before we begin, I wanted to kind of stop there and just talk about these 3 lines of code, since it's getting a bit more complex than just a single line. But you'll see that they all relate with each other. So for example, you can't use corn yield and you can't call the corn groups until you've built the corn groups. And you can't sort the corn yield until you've created the corn yield. So you can kind of see how it's step by step, which is why talking to yourself can kind of help. It helps you kind of go line by line, and then by the time you're done, you've got this long script that hopefully works, and that's exciting. So we're going to go ahead and add another box here. And now we're going to take this and create a chart out of it. So we're going to import the Matplotlib library, but we don't want the entire library like we use with Pandas. We actually just want to use some plots. So rather than pulling everything into our system that we don't need, we could actually just call a specific part of these libraries, and that's what we're going to do with Matplotlib. So we're gonna grab some plotting functions and methods, and we're going to call this PLT, which is another sort of standard practice. So when code gets a little bit more complex and you've got 3, 4, 12 lines, there's something called comments, which start with a hashtag. And this just allows you to keep your code organized. As these scripts get larger, you're going to want to make it easy for yourself and other developers to be able to understand what's going on and make adjustments. So I'm going to say using Pandas and Matplotlib to create a chart. You probably want to put some better comments in that, but that's good for now. So we're going to start with our sorted yield, because that's what we want to display, largest to smallest. We're going to call the plot function from Matplotlib, and we need to pass something into it. So we need to tell it what kind of chart, what kind of graph, what kind of thing do we want to do? Do we want to do a line chart? No, let's do a bar chart. But you can kind of see how with this programming language, there's sort of properties and things that are consistent. So once you've kind of done this a lot, you build that muscle memory and it becomes a lot more easier. So let's go ahead and see what we got. So we're going to go ahead and show this plot. Looks good. So I can see that we've got the conventional and non-irrigated and some of those practices there on the bottom grouped together. And on the left side, we've got some numbers, but I'm not really sure what that is. We know it's yield, but if someone's looking at this graph, they wouldn't be aware. So there's a few more lines of code that we need to add here to be able to make this this chart easy to read. So we're going to go ahead and do something to this plot, and we're going to add a title. And now we need to pass in what that title is. So it's going to be a string, some kind of words, right? So we're going to go with corn yield by management practice. And we need something on the y-axis where those numbers are, so it's explanatory what that is. So we want to do something to the plot again, specifically the y label. And the y label is going to say yield bushels per acre. And you'll see that I'm using parentheses inside of parentheses. So you're going to want to be careful with that, since if you don't close them correctly, you're going to be thrown an error. So let's save that and see if that makes our chart a bit more readable. And it does. There you go. So now we've got our title on the top and our y-axis that we can better understand this. And now we've got something that we can pull insights from. And let's say you want to use this bar chart and maybe take a look at different columns by yield. Well, you would scroll up and you would change these items right here with the column names that you now want to change. And this graph, once you run this graph, is going to update as well. Only challenge is the title and the Y label might not be accurate, but if you're looking for just a quick visualization to see if there's any sort of challenges or opportunities, it could be good ways to kind of take a look at data without having to redo things. And that's one of the benefits of Python and just programming in general, is that you build the script once, and then hopefully you can find ways to reuse that script. So that's the video. I hope you learned something regarding Python, and if there's any sort of things that you'd like to learn, drop them in the comments below, and hopefully I can get a video out to you. Thanks so much.